Hey, how are you guys? Is the US a tax haven? I've managed to compile around 13 countries that I'm going to show right now in a little table for you guys. And we're going to see together the tax rates, depending on how much you actually earn. Taxes are really, really complicated. It depends on what you consider a tax or not. It depends on, uh, well, whether you're married or you have kids or if you have something that you can deduct from your taxes. Like it's an infinite subject. So obviously the values here are really simplified. But what I try to do is I try to get at different levels of income how much you're paid gross. That is that how much your employer promises you compared to how much you actually get. So what's coming out isn't just income tax. Sometimes it's also like a social security tax or a pension tax or like different types of taxes that go out of what the employer promises you and to the government. And then obviously the difference, that's the tax rate. And that will be in the tables that I'll be showing to you right now. Okay, so here's a little table that I did. All my references are on this side, so it's a bunch of different websites that I used. Uh, yeah, if we get on the €30,000 a year, sorry, filter, and we put them lowest to highest, this is what we get. I compared some G7 countries and also some particular European countries and like Australia, Canada, countries that I thought were interesting to compare with the US. You can see if you make 30,000 a year, obviously there's some nuance here as well. So in the US, I'm assuming you live in a no state income tax, like it's just a given, like if you live in Florida and Texas. If you were only like a very weird state that had no income tax, then probably I would just pick one that did have one. But since there's like 13 states that don't have income tax, I think it's solid enough to you know, just pick one of them. Canada, I picked Ontario as a reference because taxes actually vary a lot depending on the province you live in. And well, a lot of people live in Toronto, so it's a good representation. And the same for Switzerland. Like Switzerland really, really changes a lot depending on the canton you live in. But then Zurich is the biggest city. It's one of the biggest cantons in terms of population, maybe the biggest. And so I feel like it makes sense for you to get that as a reference as well. Okay. So if you make 30,000 a year, which is, well, not a lot of money in most of these countries, though I have to say, like in Italy, for example, it wouldn't be a bad income. In New Zealand, it wouldn't be a bad income. In Hungary, it would be like actually a pretty good income. But those are the tax rates you pay. So you see, in Switzerland, that's going to be the lowest tax rate you're going to pay. It's going to be 11.5%, Canada 11.9, the US 13.2, and then it goes up to Australia, Ireland, the UK. You can clearly see that the Anglo countries tax at a lower rate if you earn less, whereas like some of the more classic European countries, Denmark, Italy, Germany, France, Austria, the more social security kind of vibes, they tax a lot more. And honestly, Denmark and Italy, and even Germany, honestly, are at a pretty insane rate, if you ask me. Especially Italy, I think, because Italy isn't that rich of a country anymore. And to consider that you're already paying 30% of your taxes, even though you only make 30,000 a year, like that, that's too much. Honestly, it's just too much. But things change as we go by. So if you go to 40,000, it's still similar. Switzerland, the U.S., U.S. and Canada switch. You still have most of the Anglo countries here. The UK and Ireland start being like less interesting, I guess, a little bit more on the expensive side, and same countries down west. If you go to 70,000 euros a year, the US ends up being the cheapest one. Switzerland's are already falling behind a little bit behind Hungary, which has a fixed flat 18.5% income tax rate. So it's probably going to be the best one eventually, but not at lower incomes. 70,000 is already like a decent salary in most of these countries. It's either a very good salary if you're like in Italy or in Hungary, or a very decent salary, except for maybe Switzerland and the US, where it would be like a normal salary, I guess. Uh, but yeah, the tax rates vary between 18 and 39%. And yeah, the lowest one by far, if you compare it, like it's less than half of Germany, Italy, France, is in the US. So in a way, especially at lower incomes, the US is a tax haven of sorts. and going to 120,000, which is like a big jump. It's a jump from like a decent income to an objectively good income, no matter which country you live in. And Hungary would be the lowest, though to be fair, it's kind of hard to find a job that would pay you that much in Hungary. And then the US and Switzerland are the two lowest after that at 23 and 24-ish%. And it's interesting because those are also the countries that are probably the most likely to give you a job that pays you that much. And so they're good in two ways. First, because if you actually find a job that pays you that much, well, you're going to pay much less in tax than you would in like France, Germany, Italy. And then more relevant than that, it's just more likely that you find a job that pays you that much in the US and Switzerland. And those differences really stack up because like let's round this to 20% and then let's round this to 40. That means you're making 20% more. And so that would mean what, 24,000 euros every year for the same job, for the same gross income. It's just you're paying 20 grand more every single year, or 24 grand more every single year just because of taxes. And that is a lot. Like that's a lot of taxes. Going into 180,000 a year. Hungary, yeah, still the lowest. US and Switzerland still the best. And it's very interesting that New Zealand actually ends up being kind of interesting. It has a higher tax rate on the like lower level income, 30, 40, 70, but it gets a little better compared to like Australia, Canada, the UK. And the UK is really just sad because like the UK isn't one of the best of the Anglo countries. Well, it's the worst of the Anglo countries, I think, except for New Zealand at the lower level of income. And it also grows pretty quickly to the point where now you would be paying like already 40% of all the money. And that's not the marginal tax rate. It's not like your top tax rate is this. No, it's like you're effectively giving 40% or 39.69% of your money to the government every single year. And that's stupid. That's crazy. Especially since like compare like 40% to 25%. Uh, let's say, well, in the UK you get free healthcare, right? And so let's take 15% of 18,000 180,000. 15% would be what? 30,000, something like that? No, it'd be 27,000. So if you spend less than $27,000 in the US or euros in the US than you would in the UK every year on healthcare and that kind of stuff, uh, you're still much better off staying in the US, even if you do have less like public services. So yeah, that's definitely one thing to consider. Uh, Denmark, even though people say it's like the worst country for taxes, it starts really high, but it just kind of stays near the same to the point where like now Germany, Italy, Ireland, France are really just much worse. And one thing that I'll mention is like if I were Irish, I would be revolted really because all those corporations, Google, Apple, Amazon, whatever the corporations are, go into Ireland. They pay like ridiculously low taxes, and it's fine. Like it's good. I'm all for it. But if I were working there and I saw all those corporations or the non-doms, all those tax rates that they give for expats and all that, those people are paying like very little in taxes. And like if I had to pay 40% tax on 120,000 euro income, like I would be so pissed because it's already kind of high at 30,000. Like 14.8% is already higher than most of the Anglo world. And then it jumps to nearly 20 and then 32, 40, 44, 46. Like it just keeps going up. And like Ireland is in a budget surplus now, so they don't have to do it. Like they could lower the taxes, they just don't. Like every year they have billions of euros that are left over from all the taxes that are handed to them by those big corporations. And instead of trying to lower the tax burden and make it a little bit more competitive, they're just like literally the second most taxed country in the whole list, which is a lot. Like the list has France, has Italy, has Germany, has Denmark, for God's sake. And Ireland still manages to be the one that taxes nearly the most, except for France. And like, I mean, France is just a lost cause at this point. honestly. So yeah, 250,000 euros, which is a salary you're barely gonna be seen anywhere. Like, good luck finding this in New Zealand, in uh, even Canada and the UK, honestly. Like, the only places where you could realistically find these kind of salaries, 250 plus, are Switzerland, the US, and like, I don't know, maybe Ireland and one of the tech giants. I don't know. You would hardly find one in Germany, Denmark. Maybe if you're working finance in the UK, maybe some sort of job finance in Canada or something, but overall, or Australia. But overall, it's just so much more likely to find one of those jobs in the US and in Switzerland. And then on top of that, like on top of paying better, you're still paying less taxes. Like, you're getting more, you're getting promised more, and then out of what's promised to you, you get to keep more of that. And in the case of Switzerland, you're living in fucking Switzerland, which has like outstanding public service. It's true, healthcare is not free, but like, if you're paying, let's say, in the US or Switzerland, $1,000 a month or francs or whatever, uh, it's still so much worth it compared to what you're saving in taxes. And then the healthcare is good. It's just you have to pay for it, but it's good. And if you have a decent insurance, there's like absolutely no problem in actually going to the doctor and all that, because you're gonna get taken good care of, you know? Whereas like, maybe if you're in Italy, in Germany, you might not be that lucky. And then last but not least, 400,000. The US is one of the few countries where their tax rate is really, really, really progressive. So it actually changes quite significantly from this 250 to just 400, whereas the others, you're pretty much already nearly capped. It doesn't change that much. France changed a little bit, but you're already paying half your money in taxes from France at this point. Like, it doesn't even matter anymore. And yeah, Switzerland fell a little bit now. It got to 38.8. This is a big jump from Canton of Zurich. Of course, if you're in Zug, I think even at this income, you're paying like 25%. So like, there's places in Switzerland that are even better. But yeah, for the overall majority of the population that is actually making this amount of money, they would more or less pay this amount of taxes. And you can kind of see that across the board, from low incomes all the way up into high incomes, it's just nearly better to just stay in the US, unless you consider Hungary an option, which, well, good luck trying to find a $400,000 a year job in Hungary. You know, it's just infinitely more likely in the US. And then on top of that, you're not even paying that much more taxes. And on top of that, until 70 grand, you're paying less taxes than even Hungary. And you're being like nearly, what, I think here, the US is literally the lowest on the whole list. So yeah,